Okay, guys, so here we go. We're going to look a little bit more detailed at Irish instruments, both traditional and non-traditional instruments. We're going to start with this first tutorial here is about traditional Irish instruments. Specifically, this is the fiddle. And the fiddle is, first of all, it's exactly the same instrument as a violin. So if any of you play violin in an orchestra or any setting, it's the exact same instrument. Physically, there's no difference. It has the exact same physical characteristics. Um, but it's generally speaking, we use the bow. You're unlikely to find too much finger picking or pizzicato in traditional Irish music, whereas in an orchestra setting, you would use both bow and your fingers. So it's bow nearly all the time in traditional Irish music. So first of all, that is the fiddle. Now, some of the other instruments we're going to be looking at a little bit later are the tin whistle, the low whistle and flute. We're going to look at some free reed instruments, uilleann pipes, the harp, and a lot more. There are other instruments as well. These will be the main traditional Irish instruments. Do keep in mind that we'll be looking at non-traditional instruments first of all. So as I said, first of all, the fiddle, it's the same instrument as a violin, usually played in first position only. Now, for those of you who don't play a violin or aren't familiar with positions, guitarists might be familiar with this as well. That means, generally speaking, to keep it simple, your left hand and left wrist is kept quite close to the top of the violin and doesn't move very much at all. So when I say the top of the where the tuning pegs are in the violin, it doesn't tend to move towards the body of the instrument much. It can, which would raise the range or widen the range of notes available to the player. But generally speaking, we keep in what's called first position. So the grip, because of that, the grip is slightly different to an orchestral violin, or can be. Now you can hold it exactly the same way if they choose, but because traditional Irish fiddlers don't need as much room to move their left hand, it doesn't have to be held tightly between the left shoulder and your cheek or chin. We rarely use the full bow, except as I mentioned here in the East Galway style. A little bit more about that later on. It's usually a smaller section in the middle of the bow is used. We don't tend to use the full length of the bow, and because of the amount of decorations or ornamentations used in traditional Irish music, a light grip is needed, and you'll see this in some of the videos and some of the clips you'll see later on. If you're too stiff, it's very hard to fully execute these ornamentations or decorations. So there it is. There's a picture of there on the left hand side. Nothing new there. Bow, the fiddle. It's exactly the same as a violin. The range. Now, just to point out here, the range we have from a G up to a high D. That high D is really only if you move beyond first position, which you can. Um, Normally, the typical range is G to a B, but you can extend that to a high D if you move out of first position. There are different styles now. Like just to clarify what I mean by styles, like every area, I suppose, similar to the Irish language, there would be different dialects or different conunts, as we call them in Irish. You would have, for example, Donegal Irish, Connemara Irish. There would be different. There are also different regional styles of music, and specifically traditional Irish music. We have different styles of fiddle playing. So there's the Clare style, the Donegal style, the Slieve Lucra style, otherwise known as the Cork Kerry style. And again, we've looked at that in class, that it's that kind of area in between Cork, Limerick, and Kerry, and the Sligo style. Ornamentation on a fiddle. So ornamentation or decoration. We have the roll, the cut, we have trebling, triplets, droning, and sliding. So we'll look at that in a little bit more detail now. So ornamentation or embellishments would be another word for these things. Just little decorations we can put on notes to add just a bit of colour to the music. So the first one we're going to look at here is the roll. And again, guys, I'm not going to go into this huge amount of detail here. I'm not a fiddle player or a violin player myself. So these tutorials that you see as we go along, these little clips here are better at explaining it. So the roll, this uses the melody note and the notes directly above and below it. In the example above, the first note is the note the roll is based on. So for example, if I just to show you here, this E, this dotted cross E, that's actually not part of the roll. Just to explain to you, just when I was writing this out, I couldn't write it any other way. This is the roll here, from this E, this quaver tied onto these notes here. And the roll, so the note is from the second note onwards. Again, please do look at these tutorials. It's very easy to look at them on page on a piece of paper and to learn a definition of what they are, but to truly understand what these ornamentations and decorations are, you need to look at the the clips that I've attached with you. They're very helpful. I would point out as well, a lot of this material here, I'm using the Higgins and Higgins notes book that we use in class. It's a very, very helpful book, and you should refer to it for your revision. It's very handy. The cut or grace notes are useful for separating a repeated note. The third finger is the most useful cutting finger. And again, there's a little example of it on a page. I really need you to look at these videos here. The videos will explain it to you in a little bit more detail and show you how they sound. Again, in class, I will play these in more detail. Triplets. So these are often used for filling in the interval of a third between two notes or to decorate a main note by an upper or lower auxiliary note. Again, you know exactly what triplets are. Droning. So the bow is drawn across two strings. This can otherwise be known as a double stop, while one of them is being fingered. The most common drone is the fourth below the melody note, especially at the end of a phrase. And again, just to reiterate, please, please, please look at the tutorial or the video, the clip. Sliding. The pitch of a note is changed by no more than a semitone by sliding the finger upwards along the string. Sliding often occurs from the open string E to the note F natural using the first finger, but that's by no means the only interval we do in the E to an F. It would be the only interval, but by no means the only two notes we use for sliding E to the F. And again, just to state as well here, there are four strings in a violin. The notes that the violin tunes to are G, D, A, and E, high to low. Moving along. So as we mentioned earlier, the regional styles of fiddle playing, we have the Sligo style, the Donegal style, the Clare style. No surprise for guessing where those first three styles come from. The Slieve Lucra style then is more of a kind of, I suppose, a Munster style, if you want to call it that. It's down the Cork Kerry area. The Sligo style, I'll let you read these notes yourself. Again, a lot of this material is taken from the notes textbook, the Higgins and Higgins book. And after each description of the style, there is a video playing the style and demonstrating the style. Likewise with the Donegal style. Should point out as well, these are the Glacken brothers, who are actually based in Dublin. Even though they are strong exponents of the Donegal style. The Clare style, this is an audio recording of Martin Hayes. Martin Hayes is quite, possibly the most famous living Irish fiddler. And the Slieve Lucra style, again, there I've mentioned that, often called the Cork Kerry style. And again, there's an example of it after that. A couple of famous tuners. Now, you are expected for Leaving Cert to be aware of traditional Irish musicians and famous traditional Irish musicians. Martin Hayes is a very famous Irish fiddle player. He would be one guy you'd be expected to know about, or you could be expected to know about. And there's a few of his recordings: The Morning Dew, which is a reel; I Buried My Wife and Danced on Her Grave, which is a jig; and the Galway Bay Hornpipe. He collaborates a lot with the guitarist Dennis Cahill. Noel Casey, famous with the Queen for recording the Queen of Onrua, the Cape Clear, played on an awful lot of soundtracks, famous for that, and collaborated a lot with the guitarist Artie McGlynn. Now, Artie McGlynn passed away last year, quite sadly. Fine Irish guitarist, and again, you'll notice that, as with Martin Hayes, these violin players very often collaborate with guitar players. The guitar is not a traditional Irish instrument, however. It's a non-traditional instrument. And here's an example of some other well-known fiddlers: Liz Carroll, Frankie Gavin, Eileen Ivers, Sean Keane, Tommy Peoples. Okay, guys, so that's a very brief tutorial on the fiddle, a traditional Irish instrument. And I'm going to be putting prep up now on Google Classroom. Please look at the prep there and submit it to me by the assigned date. Okay, any questions you can email me to. Thanks, guys. Well done.